Venom: The Last Chance, The Last Dance, dropped its first trailer today, and I have to tell you that I am so very excited to watch this when it comes to Netflix in 3 months. This video might come across as me ripping on the entire Venom franchise, but I really like the character of Venom from the comics, and even to some extent this version of the character. I just think the franchise suffers from some pretty egregious decisions, and outside of a few cool things in this trailer, I don't really think this gives me a lot of confidence in the future of the character. I would consider myself to be a Venom fan, and I think I basically have every first appearance of basically every symbiote that exists, and most of Venom's solo comics since his inception, but the future of his live action appearances and films and stuff has me very concerned. The first bit of this video is going to be some general discussion about the overarching problems with the franchise, but if you just want my thoughts on the trailer, go to the timestamp on the screen now. Otherwise, the Venom film franchise has never really appealed to me, mostly due to the fact that these films feel very much like they were made in 2001 and they follow a very extremely out-of-date formula. Later in the video, I'll be discussing why the franchise feels so flimsy as a whole, but to start, I feel like this film franchise broke a fairly cardinal sin when it comes to one of the most iconic spider villains and anti-heroes in Marvel's pantheon, and that is a complete lack of connection to the web crawler. I know, it's very original of me to complain about this in 2024, but it still doesn't make sense, and it's only gotten stupider as time has gone on. I'm not sure what Sony's goal was or what the contractual arrangement with Marvel was, but these films are chock full of references to Spider-Man and Spider-Man characters. I think 20 years ago you could get away with this type of thing a lot more easily due to the fact that comic reading was still genuinely regarded as like a nerd activity and the source material was locked behind a somewhat impenetrable barrier, but with the runaway success of comics over the past 2 years and the drastic increase in accessibility of the source material, you're kind of insulting your audience by messing with the fundamental elements of a character like Venom. People are pretty hip to the character of Venom. They know his origin, they know his connections, and ultimately what everybody truly wants to see is Venom versus Spider-Man, or at the bare minimum, the two of them working together, as often happens in the comics. That doesn't mean that Venom doesn't have some truly great standalone runs of comics. Two that specifically come to mind are Rick Remender's and Donny Cates' run being standouts. Honestly, Venom peaked in popularity a few years ago with the epically successful Donny Cates run and the crossover event The King in Black, something I think could have shattered box office records if Sony had just waited a little bit longer before rushing to adapt Venom to live action. More thoughts on that in a minute. Not much is known about the general plot of Venom: The Last Dance, and frankly, the trailer wasn't exactly good at getting me hyped about the greater scope of the character for films. Sony's doing their best job to crank out content that is clearly designed to appear like it's in the MCU, but we all know that it isn't, and maybe by the end of the film Venom will be in the MCU, but I doubt it considering Kevin said hell no. However, there are a ton of shots here that are clearly designed to bait and switch people into thinking that this film is part of the MCU, and it's not. This is something that Sony is notorious for. Check out my video on Madam Web for more, basically, of just that exact thing over and over again. The trailer itself lacked any clear messaging as to the greater scope of the story. There's a lot of rumors that the main narrative of the film is that, and keep in mind this is just a rumor, but it's so stupid I wouldn't be surprised if this was 100% accurate. The plot of the film is that Venom will be charged with hunting down and killing a 10-year-old Peter Parker for reasons, but then switches it up and decides to save him and help raise him into becoming Spider-Man. Look, I'm not saying that is the actual plot. I'm just saying that is the rumor from a lot of people that are very plugged in. And look, I don't know why Venom would be hunting or protecting a 10-year-old Peter Parker, but maybe it's because he was in the main MCU for like 45 minutes and he knows that Spider-Man has the potential to become one of the greatest superheroes of all time. I have no idea. I'm a YouTuber. I'm just telling you what I've heard. And honestly, that entire concept took like 10 seconds of thought, which is exactly how much effort they put into the script for Venom: The Last Stand. The original rumor was that the bad guy in Madam Web was actually somehow supposed to be a time traveler and that his goal, like the Terminator, was to travel back in time, killing Spider-Man before he becomes the iconic hero we all know and love. But sources have come to say that following heavy rewrites of Madam Web, that entire arc was scrapped, so maybe that arc is transferred over to this movie, maybe it isn't, I really don't know, but the trailer felt very purposefully misrepresentative of the plot of the film. Like, are we to expect that the third installment of this franchise's grand plot is government big mad at Venom, but also government need Venom to stop Space Monster? Because that would be equally lame of a story. By the way, the monster in this trailer looks an awful lot like a xenophage, which is not only my favorite heavy machine gun in Destiny 2, the hit looter shooter from Bungie, but it's also a monster that eats symbiotes from the comics. I'm not confirming that's what the monster is, but it certainly doesn't look like a symbiote. Even that doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. After all, if the monster came to Earth to eat symbiotes, they're what, like 2, 1, 1.5, maybe like a little baby one? That's a pretty shitty plan if you're a hungry monster. In the very beginning of this video, I mentioned that the film franchise feels very flimsy, and I think audiences are expecting that comic films reflect how comic books feel, in a sense that they should be good standalone stories, but also weave together in a way that tells a more cohesive, larger story arc. The Venom film franchise needed to be clearly mapped out before it was launched. Earlier I mentioned The King in Black, and that was a story that centered around Null, the god of symbiotes. Null was barely a thing when this film franchise started, but working some type of final art together would have really been appreciative. I was just throwing out that as an example. In an ideal world, that type of appearance of a Null, or, maybe saving Carnage for the end, or having a larger battle against Carnage that took place across 2 films, definitely could have been something that got fans a bit more hype. But right now, I'm not really seeing that energy in the third installment of this film franchise. A larger cosmic interstellar badass like Null, or somebody like Carnage in the Maximum Carnage story arc, would have been a great way to tell an isolated story in an adjacent universe without impacting the main MCU. After all, if Null or Carnage showed up in the MCU, it'd probably be an Avengers level threat at that point. So telling that type of invasion-style story in the Sony Venom-verse while interconnecting with Andrew or Tobey's Spider-Man, Kraven, Morbius, Madam Web, and whatever the hell else Sony's doing could have been really great or at least cohesive, but we are well and truly beyond those types of opportunities now. I refuse to believe that the payoff for 3 films is that Venom is somehow responsible for the creation of Spider-Man in a new Sony Spider-Man universe, and if that's the case, I might actually vomit. Another side note here is that we should also forget that we have a pretty strong indication that Toxin already exists in this universe, and I made an entire video explaining the comic book history of him, which you can check out on the screen now, but the character of Pat Mulligan within this universe is very different from the one in the comics. However, I could 100% see the following scenario unfold. The whole plot of this film plays out, whatever happens, happens, then Venom gets transported to the MCU through some bullshit, and Toxin is left in that universe to be the new Venom-like symbiotic protector. This would, again, allow Venom to come over to the MCU and make an assload of money there, and would allow Sony to make Toxin movies that nobody wants or asked for, further damaging the properties like they like to do. I have already discussed multiple times Sony's steadfast dedication to deceit when it comes to trying to trick casual audiences into thinking that these films are part of the MCU. The actor who plays the main military dude is Chiwetel Ejiofor, who played Baron Mordo in the MCU, and I'm confident that this isn't just a multiversal variant of Baron Mordo, right? The military guy is shown capturing a symbiote in a bar, similar to the post-credits scene of Spider-Man No Way Home. This scene in the trailer is incredibly stupid, because anybody who knows anything about the MCU knows that this can't possibly have been the way that this happened. You see, because this scene appears to be derived from the post-credits scene that takes place after the events of No Way Home, where Venom is actually transported from the MCU where he's currently at back to his home dimension, and he leaves a little bit of his symbiote behind in the main MCU. Except this entire film takes place in an adjacent universe to the MCU, not the main MCU. So how in the is this symbiote here? Well, here are your options. The first option is that Andy Army was also transported to the MCU, which is unlikely. That's not going to be the case. Leaving the only other option, which is number 2, and that's Sony doesn't give a shit, and they're just going to skip over that whole fact that this symbiote was left in another dimension, and they're going to act like it's all the same thing, and nobody has any long-term memory anymore because of TikTok and YouTube Shorts. That is to say, will this scene even be in the film? Because almost every major Spider-Man-less Spider movie has had a boatload of deceptive scenes in the marketing for the films. One part of my brain thinks that this scene won't even be in the movie, but the other part knows that Sony cares so little that it probably is, and they will explain it away as lazily as possible. Sony hasn't been able to demonstrate that they can put the horse in front of the cart yet and create a roadmap that they don't drastically reroute after every single piece of criticism. Speaking of horses though, come on, this is the most hype thing that this franchise has ever done and it's not close. Venom horse? Vorse? I think we're all down with Venom horse. I know we have Venom The Last Stand and then Kraven in December, and hopefully after that we don't have to run into too much more of the Spider-Man-less Spider-Universe without Spider-Man in it. Maybe Sony will, I don't know, develop another live-action Spider-Man or bring a live-action Miles Morales to the table or something that fans can actually rally behind, but I don't know. To me, this doesn't seem like it's it. What do you guys think? Do you like this? Did you like the trailer? Do you like the vibe of the franchise? Hit the like button down below and comment. It's the only way for YouTube to know that people give a crap about this video. This has been Nick with Key Issues. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch this, and remember the motto, Venom over everything.